Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on big ideas for social impact. As many of you know, creating any business is very challenging, but in particular, perhaps one of the most challenging types of businesses to make is one that's focused on social impact. So today we'll be hearing from 4 of this year's Cartier Women's Initiative Award finalists about how they went about building their businesses for social impact, and hopefully that'll give you some ideas on how to get started with yours. So introducing this year's Cartier's finalists, we're going to start with Melissa from Cameroon, who's going to tell us about hers. Melissa, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Melissa, and I'm the CEO and founder of Infiuss. Infiuss is an online blood bank, and our mission is to help patients and hospitals have access to blood because there's a huge shortage of blood in Cameroon, and people are not able to have access to life-saving blood whenever they need it. So our main objective is to ensure that we connect patients and hospitals to have access to blood. Over to you, Paloma.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paloma Farias. I'm the CEO and founder of La Fábrica Alegre. We're based out of Valparaiso, Chile, South America. Our vision is to democratize the access to the Internet of Things, particularly in the area of agriculture, so people can grow more food, save on water, use less pesticides, but also so they can build their own sensor solution if they want to. So on to Paula.
Thank you. My name is Paula Gomez. I am the CEO and founder of Epistemic. And our product is a device to warn patients with epilepsy in advance of an incoming seizure, so they can take the necessary measures to protect themselves. So our vision is to give autonomy to patients with epilepsy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. YiDing. I am the founder of Twiage. Twiage helps ambulances communicate in real time to hospitals so that hospitals and doctors are more prepared for those patients. My vision is to transform emergency response so that we can accelerate life-saving care for patients having heart attacks, strokes, sepsis, and trauma around the world.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those really inspiring stories. And congratulations to you all for being selected this year as Cartier Women's Initiative finalists. I'd like to sort of drill down and learn more about these challenges that you're trying to overcome. And personally, what I found in building our business, what we do is we convert plastic waste into different products like fuels. Is often you can have this big idea for social impact, but it's very hard to convert solving a major social problem into something that is actually, that someone's willing to pay for, and that something is, that makes it a viable business. So I'd like to hear from some of you about, how did you get started in trying to sort of go from this big social problem you're trying to solve to something that actually, could become a business with a viable product that someone was willing to pay for. And so maybe to start that off, YiDing, would you like to tell us, how were you able to go from the idea of solving this issue to actually finding someone who's willing to pay for it and make a business out of it?
Thank you, Priyanka. It was definitely an incredibly long journey to start. I came across this idea when I realized how outdated our radio systems in the United States were. And I realized that it wasn't just in the city of Boston, which is very technologically savvy. It's a very well-connected city and a well-funded city. But it was a case here, both in the United States and around the world, that the only way that a patient who's critically ill and coming to the hospital was to communicate over public radio waves. In some areas, there's no early communication at all. And so patients simply arrive without any name, without any past medical records, without an EKG for a heart attack. And that meant doctors like me were really in a black box until patients arrive. And we have hours long waits to get seen. Resources are tight. And yet for many of these patients, every second matters. And when I heard about this problem and that we've been dealing it for decades, it just seemed like one of those problems that had a no-death solution. Like, it had to be fixed. Radios were certainly not evolved to solve that problem anymore. And, you know, our thought, kind of entirely being outside the market, was to say, why can't we just do this securely with smartphones? Now, the challenge was, of course, if radios are free and public, how do you create a business where people are willing to pay for an alternative? And that was a long journey to really realize how to find a great payer for this. And we spent, and to encourage other people to spend a lot of time talking to every stakeholder in the system. And what we heard really early on was that the problem is big. Everybody suffers. The patient suffers, the ambulance providers suffer, physicians and nurses suffer, hospitals pay, get penalized for poor outcomes. And yet everybody looked at the problem and said, well, no one has a solution. This is too big. Governments run radios. Oh, I can't fix this. And so I think we realized first that the need was huge, that many people did suffer from this, and yet no one had kind of come together to solve it. And as we explored this, we found people who really heard and resonated with our pain points. We found an initial hospital in Boston called South Shore Hospital that just viewed this as the future. They said, you know, if we're not going to do this now, it's just going to happen in another couple of years. And they wanted to be part of that future. And they really helped us iterate on our initial idea. They helped us understand how it was transforming it. And we realized that while Twiage really ultimately helps patients, and we need to find someone who had the dollars to make it business sense. And for us, that's been hospitals, because hospitals suffer from long wait times, inefficiency, they get penalized for poor outcomes. And in truth, when Twiage is used, we help save 14 minutes per patient. And that means a lot more hours per day that you can use towards seeing new patients, and also faster care for the patients that you are seeing for. And that really makes business sense for hospitals. And that's really how we leverage that to grow and become a really viable business.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's really a great example of how, you know, you can go from this big problem to trying to really look at the market and figure out, you know, who is your early adopter. And I think that's something that every business needs to figure out, who's going to be your early adopter, who has that vision that you have, and who's willing to pay. Great. And Paula, did you want to also talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, okay. So what is the problem here that we saw? Patients with epilepsy, they can get really hurt, and sometimes there's even death. So that is a very big problem. And what happens in their lives is, since they don't know when a seizure will come, they stop doing certain activities because they can get hurt. So sports mainly, but many people don't drive, many people don't ride a bike, many children stay at home and don't play with their friends. And, you know, and there's a lot of stigma too. So many people cannot work, okay, because they've had a seizure at their work, and their bosses get really scared and get scared of being sued, right? Because if the person has an accident at work, the boss can get sued, right? So the thing is, how do you solve this problem? Well, if you can tell them in advance that they will have a seizure, they can go back to doing all those things and stop only at the moment of a seizure. So that was the biggest idea, okay? And the thing was to give them quality of life and lead a life that was near 2 hours. And another thing is, they depend a lot on caregivers, and we think people like to be more independent. If they're warned beforehand, and we also warn the caregiver, they can be more autonomous, and that's pretty nice for the patients. So we started talking to a lot of people. Now the question is, you ask, who's paying for all of this, right? One thing is development, another thing is the product. For the product, and we've made a lot of research, we know that early adopters, they can buy the product. And if they have a better social condition. They can buy the product and be the first ones, right? But we know that people don't spend so much money on health as they do on other things. That's almost unbelievable, but it's true. So what we've done is to prove that the healthcare system will spend less with the product, less preventing than fixing, and then we can sell the product to healthcare government agencies and insurances.
Thank you for sharing that story. Yeah, I think the common thing here is you just have to start talking to people to figure out, you can't sit in a room and try to figure out these problems. You have to really talk to just all the stakeholders and really sort of, figure out who's going to be the ultimate customer. And Paloma, did you want to share a little bit about your experience with this?
Yeah, for us, it was a little bit different because not different, but it was a product that I needed personally as a little farmer, but I'm also an engineer. So when I couldn't find that product, I decided to build it for me. It wasn't thought of as a business. So I think I didn't have to go look for the market in that sense. I knew I was the market. But from there, once it transformed into a business, I went out and we've done interviews, I don't know, hundreds of different type of farmers, different type of growers, basically anybody. Like you sit in a cab and if they say they have an avocado tree, I start interrogating them about their habits and how they go about it. But I think, like you said, the most important is just talk to everybody, even if they're not even in your market. People sometimes have insights and just don't leave nothing unturned.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And, I think the common thing here is that the reason these social problems exist is because there is no easy solution. So that's why it does take a lot of work to talk to people to figure out who are the stakeholders, because the reason, that these problems have evolved is because there is an inefficient market. So, we as innovators have to figure out how can we innovate to make the market respond to this problem. So it's really a matter of connecting the dots. So, next I'd like to move on to just some of the challenges you guys have faced in building these businesses, whether it's from market or from skeptics. I'm sure there's a whole range of challenges you've all faced, especially in different geographies and what that presents. So maybe Melissa, could you get us started on some of the challenges you faced and a little bit about how you've overcome them?
Yeah, that has actually been we have really had to struggle a lot because at the time when I started Infiuss here in Cameroon, it was in the heart of when there was like a lot of socio-political instability in the country. And I was building a digital solution and I would not even have internet connection because they had to cut off the internet. They had to cut certain parts of the country off from the internet. And so that was the first major challenge that we had, trying to build a digital solution in an economy that was very restricted as far as like internet connectivity and all of that kind of stuff was involved. And so we had to find a way to navigate around all of that to realize that, okay, we had to build this digital solution, but we had to make sure that the users or the people that had to benefit from this solution did not necessarily have to have an internet connection to benefit from our solution. Because it was really important for us to do that, because if we had built a completely digital solution, it would have been impossible for us to have users. And so when we navigated that, that was the first difficulty that we had to overcome. The second one was trying to talk to people about the fact that you're here trying to solve a problem that has existed for a very long time, and they don't even feel like there is a need for a solution to that problem. But here you are coming and bringing them a solution to it, and you have to start changing their mindset and telling them you can solve this problem from a different approach. I remember actually talking to my mother about what I was doing, And she responded to me and she said, so of everything you can do, you choose to sell blood. So it's something that we really had to, work on educating people, changing stereotypes, letting people know it's just blood. It's really not that big a deal. And that was really it was hard, and also just finding a sustainable and scalable model. I think it's something that everybody has to really struggle with, because you have an idea, but now finding the right product market fit and trying to really just find the best way that you can send your problem, you can sell your product out there. That was something that we also really had to, work a lot with. But over time, you just realize that wherever there is a roadblock, you just need to find a solution, and you'll get around it, and you just keep pushing and pushing. So those are really just some of the few problems that we had to really deal with starting this venture.
So I'm so moved by Melissa's story, because I think it's such an amazing story, and I benefit from having a very stable internet connection, and I think about women around the world who are building companies, in much harder environments. I am so inspired by people like you, Melissa. I, I also, I think there's something that really resonated with me just on what Melissa said, which is that like sometimes even the people who are most supportive of you question what we're doing, and being an entrepreneur and founder can be really lonely, because you could be in the valley of death where your company might go bankrupt, everything is going wrong. And you'll have people who are like, why do you do this? For me, they're like, you're a doctor, why don't you just practice? You can make a whole lot more money just being a doctor than like trying to salvage or to build a product. And it takes so much work, and belief in yourself, and that's so critical. And it's okay to have those moments of doubt, I think, but realizing being the most passionate person you can about solving the problem. um, for us at Twiage, so much was just changing the status quo. And I think, it's going to be a theme that we hear again and again, which is that, social problems have existed for a long time. And many people are very comfortable with how the current system works. It's not because they think necessarily that the current system is perfect, but they're just resistant to change. So many people just love the radio. I mean, they love the radio for great reasons. It's free. When the internet goes down, most of the time the radio still works. So they're thinking about the apocalypse. But it doesn't work if every day we're trying to coordinate care in a high functioning system for really sick patients, right? I do not call my friends on the radio because we have better technology now that's more reliable. And that's something that I realized. Uh, and it was a real, getting people to change their minds about that. We actually function in a voluntary market. So we tell people when we go live that you can use the radio. That's okay. If you want to do what you've always done, that's fine. But what we're going to show you instead is that if you use our platform, it's faster. You're able to send better information. You get instant feedback from the doctors. And when you arrive to the hospital, your patient has a room assigned. Your patient's already registered, and you go directly to the room instead of waiting at the desk for a room assignment. And when they start seeing that the ambulance who came by next to them that used Twiage saved 14 minutes, and they have to wait in line in the old school way, it was a transformation of adoption and uptake that didn't require our direct marketing. They just saw the benefits. And so kind of one lesson I would take away from that is that it's so important to make sure there's a direct benefit to every single stakeholder, every single end user, even if they are not paying for it. Our paramedics and EMTs use Twiage for free, but to get their buy-in, we needed to make sure that they loved our product, because they can always pick up a radio. And now we have about 90% adoption whenever we use, when we give our product to ambulances. And that, I think, says a lot about how much they love what we do. The other thing I would just quickly touch on is legitimacy. You know, sometimes you're starting out, you're new into the market. There's a lot of people who've been here for 20 years, and they're more likely the people who say, I don't know if that things could change. And so they think that, you know, maybe I'm naive or I'm too young to know the answer. I can't possibly kind of come in and solve it. And there's a bunch of ways to address that, obviously kind of being an expert. But I think, you know, doing the research, really understanding and, you know, answering all their doubts with a smile and being tenacious about getting to the core. You know, even people who didn't necessarily respect my expertise in the area respected my passion for solving a problem. And that wins a lot of people over. So I would kind of use that as a piece of advice for people who kind of have trouble saying, like, I am going to solve this problem. And when people doubt you.
That's really, really excellent advice, YiDing. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, you know, I think it's a really great point that not only, you know, when you're challenging the status quo, not only do you need to like talk the talk that, you know, this is the vision of the future, but by showing people, and in your example, like showing that these ambulances are coming so much sooner than the other ones that aren't using the service, like when it's right there between their eyes, that's how you go from, okay, you've got those early adopters, but that's how the rest of the market can then sort of catch up and see, okay, these guys are doing it. It sort of, you know, happens with every innovation and breakthrough. You know, when we moved from the horse to the car, there's all this pushback, like, oh, you know, we need to keep using horses. But, you know, once people on their horses saw the cars going by, it was just sort of like the early adopters. You saw them going by and you're like, oh, you know, that makes so much more sense. So, you know, a lot of the time it's not just about talking about your vision, but just sort of doing it and demonstrating it with that early adopter. And then everyone sort of catches on that, okay, this makes sense. So I think that's really great advice for everyone who's overcoming challenges in their startups. So next we'll hear from Paula. Paula, about your main challenges that you faced.
Well, we are not in a selling phase yet because our product takes a long time to develop. And so we have like 6 months to do our last version of the product and start clinical trials, right? So I'll tell you some of the challenges before sales, okay? And we also live in a country that has poor resources, not very poor, but does have poor. And so in Brazil, it's very hard to convince people about a business that is not immediate. Startups here, they have very short time to market products, okay? And ours is very different. So that was one of the challenges, and we needed to get funded, and we went about this problem going through government grants, okay, for research. That was one thing. And the other thing was convincing stakeholders that our method would really work, okay? Because this research has been done for the last 30 years and nobody found a solution. And so how can we find a solution here in Brazil? It's impossible, you know? So what we've done about that is start going to international conferences and talking to people abroad. And when we started getting with support abroad, we now have convinced more people here too.
That really, I'm sure, resonates with everyone. I think there's this perception, which is very strange, that if something hasn't been solved before, it's not solvable, which is completely ridiculous because, you know, obviously there's so many things that need to be constantly iterated and solved as a society. And it doesn't really matter where you're sitting in the world, like, you can solve that. And there's just so many things that haven't been solved because of things like market failure or, you know, just people like not having the passion to do it. And, you know, that shouldn't really hold you back. And, you know, I think the main thing is just proving people wrong. And, you know, as YiDing mentioned, like showing sort of your genuine passion for what you're trying to solve, and just, really coming across as an expert in it and establishing that credibility. All these things, are ways of pushing back on these skeptics and doubters who are like, who challenge you. And yeah, Paloma, did you want to share a little bit about your experience as well?
Yeah, I just want to second Paula that like we build physical products that are technological, and in South America, and people were like, you cannot do that. Nobody does that. And everybody expects profits like within like very little time. So it's really challenging to build hardware from a little bit less developed place. But like Paula, I think, when people don't listen here, we go to other places. We went to the United States, Europe, and it's like, and once you get a little bit more attention from there, then people here were like, well, maybe you're onto something. So, but I'm so happy other people are building physical stuff that are technological in South America. Good job, Paula.
Yeah, no, that's a great point about geography. And that's a great thing about the Cartier Network is you're going to meet people from all over the world and see, how these applications can be applied in other geographies. And, maybe there are early adopters in other places that you're not aware of. So you're going to really all enjoy getting together and meeting each other very soon. So let's move on to, one of the challenges with social impact businesses is how do you measure success? So Melissa, do you want to tell us a little bit about your company and how you go about measuring success for yourself?
So with social businesses, unlike when you're building a capitalist business, it's easy to say, oh, I'm not going to measure success in terms of financial gain and all of that, because when you're starting a social business, the real problem you're setting out to do is to solve a problem, not really for like the financial gain that is going to come off of solving this problem. And so it's really important that you always try to stay true to who you are. And so for us at Infiuss, success to us is, how many people get back to us with positive feedback and say, oh, thank you, I was not able to find access to blood, and thanks to your team and your platform, I was able to access this. Success to us is referral, word of mouth referral. If you're able to tell somebody, go tell your friend, that is success to us. Success to us is, recognition. We're sitting here in Cameroon and, we are having Cartier Women's Initiative coming out and saying, look, you're doing a good job and we want to support you. That is really just what success means to us. And even though it takes a lot more time for you to see financial gains and everything, just this feeling that you're actually creating a difference is really just what, drives us and makes us come here every day and do what we do. So that is really just what success means to us here.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think, when you have a social impact business, it's not just about defining success with the bottom line. There's a lot of these intangible things, and like that satisfaction of really solving a problem and having people refer your business to others. I think those are things to feel really proud about. Anyone else that wanted to add to that on how you've sort of evolved your thinking about how you define success for yourself? I know that sometimes, when you're in the education world and in school, you define success with grades, and you're in the business world, you can just focus on money. But, sometimes with social impact, you have to think a little bit about, other ways of just defining success. And one question we've received coming in here is, how sustainable is this idea of relying on only your passion for, driving you? Like, are there other things that have evolved over time as well that drive you? Does anyone want to touch on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think that for me, I'm in the healthcare space, and as a doctor, it seemed like if we just improve patient outcomes or improve quality, people should pay for that, right? And unfortunately, That's actually not true. Everybody says, like, you know, if you improved the quality of your care, everybody wants that. But the dollars or the checks weren't written that quickly for that challenge. And so we quickly realized that while everybody verbally said that they cared about quality, they weren't willing to give us money or pay for our system. And so they needed a different incentive. And that was kind of a reality check for us. So there is both like kind of the mission, and then also how do we quickly kind of get to the metrics that really matter to some of our clients. And I would never say that our clients don't care about the quality. They absolutely do. It's just that they have other urgent business needs, and they need to figure out how they're going to allocate their own budgets. And so we had to be really smart about that. And we that kind of went back to the drawing board and really understood, you know, what was the value? How could we measure our efficiency? We did studies to really kind of get to the dollar amount of the return on investment, you know, because we are trying to be a profitable business. And I think we can be incredibly, I think social impact businesses can be incredibly successful. And so we do look at things like the bottom line. We do look at things like a return on investment. And our view of that is that if our clients get a major return on investment, it means that we're delivering something that's really valuable to them. And the more impact that I can have there, the more downstream impact I have on more patients. Twiage now has helped over nearly 100,000 patients get faster medical care. And so we spend so much energy on our teams ensuring that our clients love using the product, and that they choose Twiage over standard of care all the time, and that the adoption rates are high. Because if the adoption rates are high and they're happy, then they actually use it with more patients, and therefore more patients benefit. And so we kind of have this tier of looking at all these metrics, and we track our client acquisition in terms of hospitals, we track ambulance acquisition, then we track utilization and patient volume, because all of those mean that we're doing the right thing. We're not just selling, but when we sell, our product is actually giving value. You know, to the question about relying only on passion, I would say, you know, I would frame it a little bit differently. I think you have to have passion, but it's not sufficient. And there is, this is a really hard road to be a founder, and it's very difficult to do. I have definitely not done it alone. And so I would say that I have passion for what I do, because when I feel like I am about to give up, or it feels so hard to move forward, or I feel like I just hit a wall, the fire in your belly is what keeps you going. And if you didn't feel so passionate, you might give up at that moment, and that could be a missed opportunity. So if you're going to dedicate hours and hours of your life, if you're going to give up the opportunity to do something else, you should be so passionate about what that is for you, because you'll get yourself through the hard days. But there are so many other things that you need. You need support for loved ones and family who say, you know, you believe in this, so I believe in you. You need team members who complement your skill set and can give and help you out throughout the process. You might need funders and investors who, again, will be willing to put capital behind you to do this. There's an endless amount of actual work that goes into actually running and scaling a company. It's just that you have to have passion. In fact, if you are passionate about what you're doing, more people are likely to invest in you. More people are likely to join your team because they are inspired by you. And so I think it's the start of where it is, but not the whole package.
Yeah, and I think that's really resonates probably with everyone here, is just that idea of the fire in your belly that's sort of always there. And there's going to be plenty of things you have to do as a founder that you just don't enjoy. You know, for instance, I was here past 11 p.m. last night, you know, working through a legal agreement and, you know, talking through it on the phone and, you know, having to dissect every word. And it's something that I just don't really enjoy, but it's something I just have to do, part of my job. And there's plenty of those little things that, you know, I don't enjoy about the job. But you just have to, you have to have that sort of, you know, understand that it's all just sort of necessary and part of getting to where you want to go. So yeah, I mean, it's really that concept of the fire in your belly. And I think, as you pointed out, having people around to sort of reinforce it, because you know, there's going to be like tough times, and so you need to have, you know, people around you who just sort of keep you going, even if, you know, some days you're just like, you know, why am I doing this? Like, you know, this is, you know, this particular task is very frustrating, or whatever it might be. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, some people will argue that social businesses can never achieve the profitability and scale of, big corporations like Apple and Google. I'd like to get, some of your ideas about this. I think, Paloma, you had some thoughts about this, concept. Do you think social impact businesses can, become big, sustainable global corporations?
Absolutely. I think it's proven too, and I think we do even have more advantages than some other traditional businesses. Our story is much stronger, and I think people relate to that today. Like a business, of course, the story is not the most important part, but it is who we are, and it's why we do it. And I think that translates and gives us a communication channels with our customers, our allies. I think that also makes our customers or users are more than just somebody we sell stuff to. They're our fans and our allies. And for us, even though, we are selling something that is a prototype, so it comes with a little bit of flaws, a little bit of tweaking, and I hate that. But I also noticed that I thought the customers would hate it, but that's not the case. They're like, don't worry, we'll fix, like they're part of something else. And I think that's so much stronger than if we went out there and we're a big corporation and that had only like a large profit in mind, that we are doing something together. So yeah, absolutely. I think we have advantages in corporation. For me, it's also having a business it's a platform. It's like a way of showing the world that this is also how you can do it. So it's like, I don't know, I think it's very powerful, and definitely social businesses, I think, are the future, and we could definitely even make more money than the rest of them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the world is evolving from this mindset of the traditional corporation, and sort of in the age we live in with, social media creating sort of greater transparency, people are really thinking about, what impact are we going to have, and want to be associated with brands that are making a difference, and, want to lead meaningful lives. So I think there are a lot of opportunities there. And I think, perhaps we're moving to a world where the businesses of the future will look very different from the businesses of the past. And just, even how we define success will be different. And, with the greater transparency now, it's not enough to just be this sort of big corporation. You can be so easily, like, so heavily scrutinized, obviously, as a big company, as we've seen with Facebook in the past week. You have to really show that you're adding value to people's lives in a meaningful way. So I definitely agree that sort of the mindset is shifting on that. Did anyone else want to add to this point about, sort of social impact businesses being able to, be as impactful as, big corporations, and, as profitable even?
I really want to emphasize on the fact that I strongly believe that social impact businesses can be as profitable and as large as a lot of traditional corporations. Because if you even look at every corporation, you'll always see that there is a tiny aspect of like social good in everything that people are doing, no matter what it is, even if it proves out to be like very financially profitable, because for you to start a business, whether it's a traditional business or whatever, you have to first of all start out by, solving somebody's problem. Even if it's just in exchange of goods and services, if I come and give you my money, it's because I have a need, I have something that you have something that I want. And I think it's the whole problem with social businesses is we just take a longer time to get to that point. We need a lot more resources, we take longer and everything like that. But I really strongly believe that, social businesses have the ability to be like a big profitable businesses in the future.
Okay, and I wanted to add that the businesses you're mentioning, like Google and Apple and things like that, they are also starting to get involved in social businesses. So if they weren't profitable, they wouldn't get into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, you know, these big corporations realize how important it is to nowadays. And it was very different 20 years ago. They could get away with not ever talking about any social impact. But I think now they realize that it's just a matter of surviving in the market, that they have to be showing their value to society as a whole. Otherwise, consumers will, you know, can easily just sort of take them down overnight. And there's been so many examples of businesses that, you know, there's just been some scandal that broke out, and people just don't want to be associated with that brand anymore, and it can just kill a business overnight. So, so yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, one of the challenges is that, you know, the way that, you know, the stock market's set up is it's just very short-term focused. And obviously, in order to create like a real social impact business, you have to be very long-term focused. And I think, you know, we're sort of trying to, as a society, figure out, you know, how do you, you know, balance sort of wanting to focus on solving these long-term issues when you're sort of in this rigid structure of having to show short-term results, you know, and so that's why the way you finance your company and the types of investors you have is very critical, because that can really sort of dictate how long-term focused you can be. We're getting sort of right to the end here, so maybe we can just sort of share some thoughts, some final thoughts on what advice you have for other entrepreneurs looking to create social impact businesses, and also just like any final points on, you know, what keeps you inspired to keep going, or, you know, a bit more about your passions. But feel free to jump in. Maybe we can start with Melissa here on just sort of any general advice you have for entrepreneurs who might be starting out and thinking about creating a social impact business.
My advice to anybody trying to start a business is you really have to do something you're very passionate about, because you know, this is going to be a very huge part of your life. This, if not, you know, your entire life that you're giving up. You're going to spend a lot of time working on this. So it's really something that has to drive you, something that moves you to your core, something that every time you sit and ask, why am I doing this? It has to be something that just says, that drives you. You need to be really passionate about it. And you just need to get started. You must not always be perfect at the beginning. You know, if you have a crappy product, a crappy service, put it out there, start, and you can always improve as you move on. Because, you know, if you keep waiting until it gets perfect, you're not going to get it started at all. So, and, you know, just have fun doing what it is that you do. Every day you meet people, you talk to people. That should really just be something that, you know, maybe if you weren't doing this, you'll not have the opportunity to do that.
I think we forget, like, you know, you just have to take one step forward every day. You don't have to take these huge leaps and bounds. And obviously when you see other successful entrepreneurs, you say, oh, they went from here to here. But yeah, it was like a lot of like little steps and falling down along the way. So, so that you just have to keep moving and keep having fun. I think that's great advice. Paloma, did you want to add to that?
I think we heard a lot about the passion part and how important that is. I totally second that. I also think it is difficult to do this. There's a lot easier ways to make money than being an entrepreneur and following your dreams and passion. So it's really important to get a support system that can come from your team, your family, friends, but basically anybody. Have that strong support system that will help you keep going, get on online groups, whatever you need. And you need multiple support systems because it does get hard eventually. But yeah, you need that base so you can go back and refuel. And just have that. Doesn't have to be women or like mentors, but just have many different people giving you different advice. I think that's my biggest advice, actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So we had one more question come in before we move on to the final advice from YiDing and Paula. So if any of you wants to answer this, the question is, what's the biggest mistake women and entrepreneurs tend to make? Do any of you guys have some thoughts on this?
I'm just going to share a personal experience from which I tended to, I really, when I started, I always felt like because I was a woman, it was going to be easier for me. But the truth is, it really doesn't get easier because you're a woman. As soon as you put yourself out there, you're going to be judged on the same playing field as the male counterparts. I always thought, oh, I'm a woman, they're going to listen to me. No, that was not the reality. And, you just really have to get ready. You have to get strong. Being an entrepreneur has made me strong. So you have to get ready and know that because as a woman, you're not getting any special favors. You're not going to have it easier. And just get ready for whatever, they're going to throw you up and down, and you have to be ready for that.
Melissa, I'm so impressed that you thought it was going to be easier. I never thought it would be easier. Because I think one of the challenges that I think about or I come across is that despite my education and my training, it's that well, does she know how to run a business? And there's so many times where I've walked into investor meeting and they look to the man on my team to answer a question about business development or business strategy. And I think about, like, I am the one who created the business strategy. I can answer this question. This is my strategy. One thing that I think I've seen, and maybe this is a mistake that I also make, is that we apologize a lot, and I think women might not be as forceful about advocating for something, because it might make us come across as not as nice. We try to be really nice about things, and I see my fellow friends, male entrepreneurs, who unapologetically go forward and say, well, this is just what I had to do. And they have no qualms. They apologize to no one. And I think there's a fine line. Like, never do I want any woman or any person think that we should become jerks, because I think we should all be good humans. But I also think that, a lot of cultures, women are viewed as, the kinder, caring, and you're judged if you're not, of that stereotype. And, why are you so outspoken? Why are you so stubborn? Why can't you just, take your argument elsewhere? And I think we have to fight against that. There's no wrong in fighting for what you believe in. There are going to be people who treat you really unfairly, and you do not need to apologize for responding appropriately to that. You have to be really strong. I think that women are incredibly resilient. They, there's so much of saying, that they, I think the world expects less of women in many ways in terms of business. They think that, oh, your husband will make the money, or, you can grow up and marry a doctor. And so I think that it's very common for women to be second guessed or told to have lower expectations. And yet that makes us incredibly resilient. And that is probably one of the most strongest qualities of an entrepreneur, because you will be beat down. And if every time you find a challenge and somebody insults you or somebody tells you that you're not good enough and your ego wilts and you just give up, you'll never succeed as an entrepreneur. But I think women are really good at being underdogs, and underdogs are always underestimated. And so you will overperform what you can actually do. And if you believe in yourself, and as Paloma said, you have people surrounding you who also believe in yourself and give you guys the core, you will do far more than you might even think that you could accomplish.
The underdog part definitely resonates with me. I feel like I'm living on the power of the underdog. But there's strength in that. And from a business point of view, like you just said, there's often where I've had client meetings where they don't even look at me. Like they look at the male partner that I have with me, or like a technician that doesn't know as much as me, and you have to swallow that pride. My eye twitches, but then in the end, it's more important to get a sale done than my ego. So a big point is, breathe and leave your ego at home. This is not about being the star. But also being an underdog has helped us in the way that people underestimate us, and then it gives you a little bit of time to refine your product. Nobody sees you as competition, which is really good, and just do your little ways, a little bit humble, and then when you're there, you can boom. Definitely use the underdog part. And also people share more information when you're not as, you know, on top or like loud as many men are. I've noticed even my competition has approached me and talked a lot more freely about their numbers and etc. that they wouldn't do if I was, you know, if they view me as really competition. So use the underdog thing, definitely.
About mistakes we can make, I think we're very caring, and that's good, okay? But sometimes with teams, we cannot let the team mix the thing of caring, like you treat them as your own and you put them under your wing, you know, with letting them do whatever they want. So that's something that can be mixed up, and that's a mistake I think women do. Not that I mean that you shouldn't be caring, but just make it clear what's caring and what's the job, you know.
Yeah, no, these are great points. And I think, you know, the key takeaway is just to be aware of these perceptions that exist as women, and really trying to find opportunities, like Paloma was saying, that, you know, understanding that how can you use this to advantage. So, you know, the fact that you are perceived as the underdog, people might share more information. So, you know, how can you create an opportunity out of these perceptions, and don't let those perceptions define you. It's, you know, I think YiDing was talking about this a little bit as well. Is like, you know, make sure that, you know, you are defining yourself and not letting society define you. I think, you know, there's some great points that you guys made there. And yeah, did you guys, YiDing and Paula, did you want to add any last bits of advice before we wrap up here?
I think so many of my colleagues here have given great advice. My leaving note then is focused on how important it is to have values for your team and your company. When I first started, I thought, well, we're going to solve and save lives. So obviously our social mission meant that our company values are no doubt. I didn't have to think hard about it. But it's so critical now, looking back, on ensuring that your co-founders, every team member shares the core values of your team. And I think social impact businesses probably are more mission driven and have better aligned values than more kind of other more traditional businesses, but it's equally important to ensure that every single day when your team comes in, you understand what you mean by work ethic, what you mean by mission, how you're going to align the company, how you're going to act when push comes to shove. You know, if you, for example, if you say as a CEO for your company that transparency is what you believe in, is a value for the company, when you have trouble making payroll or when there's something really bad that happened, are you going to still be transparent to your employees and to other people? Or are you going to try to cover it up? And talking about those values early, identifying what they really mean to you, you know, those values are tested in the fire, and they are so important. It's like a learning that I've kind of realized that you need to ensure that you know what you believe in and what you're going to stand about and how you're going to be defined in those moments where you're going to be really challenged. So define your values early, and then they're evolving too. You know, by no means is your values like a written in stone from day one, but knowing to revisit it, to think about it, means that you kind of stay better aligned to your core, and that means a healthier you overall.
My final advice is, like everybody pointed out here, it's really hard and you're going to have some really hard days. So be resilient, and then be resilient again. And stick to your point. You know, your passion is very important for that. And another point is focus. Everybody's is going to come to you and say, oh, since you're not working, like, yeah, I'm working. You can, you could always try this, and it's something completely out of your focus. It's, you know, what's gonna, if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Yes, it matters. Your time matters. So really think about your time and what you can do with it, and focus on having your first thing done. Until you have one thing done, don't go to the next one. That's my final advice.
Thanks, ladies. And thank you all for making the time today. It was, really inspiring to hear about all your stories and, some of the challenges and how you've gone through them. And I'm sure we're going to continue to see great things from each of you. Each of you is working on just really exciting, revolutionary things. So with that, do tune in. We're going to be having 2 more webinars hosted by Cartier Women Initiative Awards on this question of how to build a business for social impact, featuring some of the other finalists this year. So do tune in for those, and we look forward to seeing you then.